Hey everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. Big weekend of prep races coming up, 3 100-point to the winner preps taking place across the country. In this video, we're going to take a look at the 9th race on Saturday at Keeneland. It is the Grade 1 Bluegrass going the mile and an eighth distance for the 3-year-olds. And we have one of the high-profile early Kentucky Derby contenders in this race, the number 1 Tapit Trice. And as you throw up the field of 11 for this Bluegrass, you see he is pegged as the 5-2 favorite on the morning line. I might expect this horse to go off a little bit lower than that, just given the fan following that Tapit Trice seems to command. Some people might be a little bit deterred by the rail draw here, but Tapit Trice definitely appears to be the one to beat in this Bluegrass. Other horses listed at single digits on the morning line include the number 3 Verifying, a Brad Cox trainee. Blazing Seven's a Grade 1 winner from his 2-year-old season last year, and also the recent Gotham winner, Raise Cane. So definitely some horses coming off some good efforts in this Bluegrass, but Tapit Trice clearly seems like the one to beat on the way in to this Grade 1 affair in Kentucky. Before we get to the main contenders, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this Bluegrass field. And no surprise to see that favorite, the number 1 Tapit Trice, shown all the way towards the back of the pack on the pace projector. He breaks slowly and just doesn't have a whole lot of early speed. The good thing for Tapit Trice is that that fast pace flag is showing up. So you would imagine that some of these horses that are shown towards the front end might be coming back to him. In particular, the number 9 Major Blue, who is a long shot in this race, who I would also project to be the speed just based on his form. He's coming out of a leading performance when he went gate to wire in a 5.5 furlong race. So clearly Major Blue has the speed to get to the front end going the 9 furlong distance of this Bluegrass. Just not sure he's one that will be around at the finish. I will note that some of the others that are shown right behind Major Blue on this pace projector are not necessarily front-running types. The number 3 Verifying, more of a stalker. The same thing for the number 2 Clear the Air, who even when he's most forwardly placed, he's typically in the pocket behind horses. So I'm not really anticipating that Major Blue is going to have that much contention for the front end. He's just a fast horse that might help the race fall apart if he comes back to the field. So I'm not really knocking that fast-paced designation, but it's not a race where I expect the pace to be particularly contested on the front end. Let's move on to the TimeformUS finish projector, one of the new features in TimeformUS. This is the TimeformUS algorithm selections based on speed figures and the pace situation in the race. And the number 3 Verifying, who is that second choice on the morning line, shown as the projected winner of this race, just ahead of that morning line favorite, the number 1 Tapit Trice, with quite a gap back to the others. So based on the TimeformUS data, it's saying that these are the 2 best horses in the race, at least based on their recent speed figures and the way this race is likely to unfold. You notice the number 7 Sun Thunder is the one that gets that highest late pace flag, which was also showing up on the pace projector. He's another one that would appreciate any pace that develops and comes apart towards the front end, but he was only shown getting up for 4th on this finish projector. Well, let's go through some of these contenders, and we'll begin the conversation with the number 1 Tapit Trice and look at his last victory in the Grade 3 Tampa Bay Derby at Tampa Bay Downs. That is him on the left of your screen, that big gray rolling down the center of the racetrack. We didn't show the earlier portions of this race, but there were some anxious moments down the backstretch and around the far turn when Luis Saez was motivating this horse, and he appeared to be going nowhere, but he clearly figured things out in the final quarter mile as he used those big, powerful strides to reel in the field here, running right past Classic Car Wash, who's also back in this race, to go on to the 2-length victory that you see indicated in his past performances here. The 109 TimeformUS speed figure that he earned for that last out win, it's not the highest number in this field, and it's not particularly impressive for a horse on the Kentucky Derby trail. He's going to have to run faster if he stamps himself as a legitimate Kentucky Derby contender, and I think a lot of people are hoping for some speed figure progression in this Bluegrass. But the one thing about Tapit Trice is that he doesn't always give himself the chance to run a fast speed figure because he so often breaks slowly from the starting gate, and it's not that he's so poor reacting to the starter. He's just very sluggish in those opening 5 or 10 strides coming out of the gate, which puts him towards the back of the pack in the early stages. So breaking from the rail post, you would imagine Luis Saez, having gotten to know this horse, is going to let him do that, break slowly, and then try to get him to the outside ride once he's in 11th place, moving into that clubhouse turn, and try to make progress from there. But you have to hope that he responds to the riders' cues a little better than he did at Tampa Bay Downs last time, because this is clearly a better field that he faced in the Tampa Bay Derby. So I would like to see some progression from Tapit Trice if he's going to maintain his standing as one of the leading Kentucky Derby contenders. Let's move on to the horse that was second to him in that Tampa Bay Derby, Classic Car Wash. This is a horse that I know I had made a push for last time in that Tampa Bay Derby, and he ran pretty well to be second at 13-1, coming off what was not an ideal trip two back when he finished third in the Sam F. Davis. Kind of a few stop and start portions of that race that maybe prevented him from achieving a higher placing that day. Last time out, he was simply just second best to Tapit Trice. Really no match for that foe from an ability standpoint. And I think that second place finish is probably the ceiling for Classic Car Wash right now. And now he's moving up into a tougher spot in the Bluegrass. So this just seems like a tough assignment for a horse like Classic Car Wash, but he does figure to be a big price once again. The horse that's the second choice on the morning line is the number 3 Verified. Let's take a look at his last race when he was beaten as the 3-2 favorite in the Grade 2 Rebel at Oaklawn Park. Now, this was run over a sloppy track, and take note of Verifying's positioning at the top of the stretch. He's in behind some tiring runners that are going in the wrong direction. You could see under Florent Giroux, he had to alter course to the outside of that gray horse, then move back towards the inside to sort of regain that lost momentum at the top of the stretch. And he does finish up pretty well to get back up for fourth in this race. The trip just didn't really work out on this day. And in addition to the fact that he lost that momentum at a critical point in the race, he was also placed much closer to a fasterly pace than many others who had success in that race. Horses like Confidence Game, Red Route 1, and Reincarnate, who were the 1, 2, 3 finishers, were all closing into that fast pace that's indicated by those red color-coded pace figures in the TimeformUS PPs, whereas Verifying was sitting in the pocket up close to the early leaders and lost momentum, had to regain it. So not the ideal trip for Verifying in that Rebel Stakes. We'll see if he can continue to move forward. He was impressive in that allowance victory two back at Oaklawn Park when he was a 5-length winner over horses like Gunpile and Two Eagles River, who have subsequently disappointed themselves in some Derby preps. So I think we're still waiting for a true read on Verifying's quality. My problem with Verifying, in addition to him having to step up and prove it against some tougher horses, is the 1.125 distance. These progeny of Justify just have not proven that they really want to go this far. Out of a large sample, Justify is winning at just 6% with all of his dirt route starts among his progeny. So a lot of the progeny of Justify have done better over shorter distances than longer distances, and Verifying strikes me as one that might not be getting better with added ground. So that's just a little bit of cause for pause with the horse that could be the second choice in this Bluegrass. Let's move on to a horse that's coming out of a victory over a wet track, and that is the number 10, Raise Cane. We'll take a look at his smashing victory in the Gotham, where he just absolutely dominated a large field of runners, and he got a good ride this day and trip from Jose Lezcano. There was a brief spot of trouble on the far turn, but Jose did well to extricate himself from that, and he saved all the ground, tipped off the rail when it really mattered to just mow down his rivals in this stretch, and really the only one that's in the same zip code as him is in the final stages of this race is that loose horse who lost his rider at the start. I do want to also note we highlighted in this replay another horse, Clear the Air, and you might want to just rewind the tape to take a look at him as well. He is a horse that did have some trouble I'll talk about in just a little bit, but Raise Cane, I think he's got to prove that Gotham was no muddy track fluke, because he really did take a step forward on his prior form. That Gotham was not shaping up like the kind of race that was going to be won by 7 lengths by anybody, and he just absolutely dominated that field. He's another one that I have some questions about the distance with him. I've been much more impressed with his finishing ability in his 1-turn races than I have been in his 2-turn races. He's got the kind of turn of foot and acceleration that often is more indicative of a horse that has success as a sprinter miler, as opposed to one that can be successful where stamina is a real asset. So I have some questions about him going the 1.125 distance and backing up that effort. I do think you're going to get much higher than that 9-2 morning line on Raise Cane. I think he's going to be more in the 7, 8, maybe 10-1 range. So if you like him, you'll get a better price, I believe. But Raise Cane, probably not for me in this bluegrass. As for that other horse that I wanted to highlight in that replay, Clear the Air, you might have noticed he had some trouble in upper stretch there, kind of sandwiched between runners, had to alter course back to the inside. He also had trouble before we started that replay around the far turn, and he was just continually getting shuffled back along the rail. I'm not sure being right on the rail was where you wanted to be at Aqueduct on Gotham Day, and he was caught behind a tiring runner early in the race, so lost momentum around the far turn, lost momentum at the top of the stretch, but still finished up decently to get up for fifth, beaten just 2.5 lengths out of second place that day. A better than it looks effort from Clear the Air. He'd also had some spots of trouble in his prior start over the synthetic course at Turfway, so this horse is definitely dirtied up coming into this bluegrass. I still have some questions about how good he is overall. He's never run the kind of speed figure that really points him out as a contender in this race, but his trainer, William Walden, does have good numbers with his dirt starters in a limited sample overall. He's 8 for 30 over the past 5 years with dirt starters with a $2.63 ROI if you look up his stats in Formulator. So some things to like about Clear the Air at what figures to be a big price in this bluegrass. Another horse that has to rebound from a disappointing result is the number 8. That is Blazing Sevens. This one goes out for the Chad Brown stable, a horse that had a lot of success during his 2-year-old season, earning a grade 1 victory over a sloppy track in the Champagne last year. That set him up for a pretty solid 4th place finish behind Forte, Cave Rock, and National Treasure in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Those 110 TimeformUS speed figures would make him competitive against this field if he could get back to that form. The problem is he showed no hints of still possessing that kind of ability last time out in the Fountain of Youth, but he was just never involved, sluggish right out of the starting gate, never really mounted a rally that day. His trainer, Chad Brown, seems to think that he did not react well to the kickback at Gulfstream Park, didn't like the surface that day, so he's drawing a line through that race. I'm not quite so willing to do so, especially for a horse that's going out for that powerful Chad Brown stable with Irad Ortiz in the irons. Just based on the connection power, he could take some money in this race, and I don't want to bet a horse at any kind of short price that is coming off the kind of dismal effort that Blazing Sevens is. Sun Thunder is one of 3 Ken McPeak trainees in this Bluegrass Stakes, and I want to touch upon all of them. Sun Thunder is coming off a disappointing 5th place finish in the Louisiana Derby just 2 weeks ago, and I would imagine that running back 2 weeks later in this Bluegrass is a little bit of a plan B for the connections, because I know they were hoping to get those Kentucky Derby qualifying points last time in that Louisiana Derby. Didn't quite work out, but I do want to give him a pass for that race, because you see those TimeformUS pace figures for the race all color-coded in blue across that running line. That was just an extremely slow pace that really favored the eventual winner, Kings Barnes, and worked against horses that were trying to close into the pace, including Sun Thunder. And furthermore, Sun Thunder was just bottled up towards the back of the pack, racing along the rail, really never had a chance to build up momentum until they got into the stretch that day, at which point the race had already gotten away from him. I did think he finished up pretty well once he finally got into the clear. It was just impossible to make up the necessary ground, given how far back he was by the time they got to the 8th pole of the Louisiana Derby. So I definitely think Sun Thunder is better than that most recent performance. And while he did get a good trip to back in the Risen Star to be second to Angel of Empire, we've seen the horse that finished right around him in that race, Angel of Empire and Two Fills, come back to significantly improve in their subsequent starts. And Sun Thunder just didn't get the chance to do so because of the pace scenario next time out in the Louisiana Derby. So I do think Sun Thunder is better than he looks on paper, and I also think he's a horse that has more tactical speed than it might appear. And with this rider change to Florent Giroux, I won't be surprised if he's a bit more forwardly placed in this Bluegrass, not contesting the pace or anything, but I could envision him getting a mid-pack trip, which would work much better for him in this stakes on Saturday. Another Ken McPeak trainee is the number 5, Haze Strike. This one has some things to prove from a class and consistency standpoint. His form is a little bit up and down. He ran a good race last year in the Kentucky Jockey Club back in November to be a closing third into a slow pace behind Instant Coffee. Arguably, the form of that race hasn't really panned out over time. And he did come back with a couple of disappointing efforts. Got back on track last time in the private terms at Laurel, but was beating a weaker field that day. He's now stepping up in class. That 107 Timeform US speed figure is okay, but I feel like we might have seen the ceiling for Haze Strike last time out. And then the final runner I want to talk about is another Ken McPeak trainee, the number 11 Mendelssohn's March. Let's take a look at his last race at Oaklawn Park, and he is the one on the rail coming into the stretch in about 6th place. And just watch the turn of foot that this horse displays as he comes through inside of the leaders here. Gets into a pretty tight spot right here, but shows no discouragement coming through along the inside to quickly put away those rivals to his outside. And you can see he's got his ears pricked coming onto the wire, winning this race easier than the length and a half margin of victory might suggest. I really like that performance from Mendelssohn's March, and that was his first ever time on the dirt. It was run over a sloppy track, but I like that he showed the versatility to handle that going, as well as turf on debut, and he's got a nice pedigree to maybe improve going this 1.125 distance, being a half-brother to a horse named Mr. Big News, who was 3rd in the Kentucky Derby back in 2020. That was that odd Kentucky Derby run in September, won by Tis the Law, but that horse still ran well going the 1.25 distance. So Mendelssohn's March, not the biggest horse you're ever going to see, doesn't necessarily have the frame of one that says longer distances, but I just like the way he moves. He's got this really fluid action to him, and I think that this horse might be better than his speed figures indicate, and feels like one that could be a big price in this bluegrass. So let's throw my picks for the bluegrass. Tapit Trice, definitely the horse to beat. I've got him second in my picks. I think he is the most likely winner of this race, but I just have some concerns about those character traits where he breaks slowly, can disengage from his rider's cues. Based on natural ability, I think he's the one that you have to worry about, but I'm just a little concerned that the value might not be there with Tapit Trice. So I want to look in some other directions, and I'm intrigued by a couple of Ken McPeak trainees. I put the number 7 Sun Thunder on top. He's my top pick. If he's anywhere near that 10-1 morning line, I think that's excellent value on him. I actually think fair value on Sun Thunder is much closer to 5 or 6-1. So he's my top pick in this race. I just think he's a horse that did not get a chance to show his true ability last time in that Louisiana Derby. And then the number 11 Mendelssohn's March, a horse that I thought showed real talent in that allowance victory last time at Oaklawn Park, also one that can outrun his 20-1 morning line odds. And I've even got that long shot, the number 2, Clear the Air, in there. This bluegrass, definitely a race where you can go shopping for a little bit of value, and I would use all 3 of those price horses in this race, though the number 7 Sun Thunder is my top pick in the bluegrass on Saturday at Keeneland. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.